Greetings, Vermont Law and Graduate School, Restorative Justice in Indigenous Communities. My name is Dr. Thomas James Reed. I also go by TJ. My Oneida name is Laguadio, which means he is a good man. And I would like to take a moment to introduce myself in my Oneida language, if that's okay with you. And in my people's language, what we would say, Sigoli, Narioliwas, Skanagoga, Skanago, Wagnukta ni Wagitalota, Oniada Aga ni I, Wagwaewe ni I, Laguadio ni Yugyuks. And I just said in Oneida, greetings, what is the news? Are you with peace? I am with peace. I am people of the standing stone. I am Oneida, and my Oneida name means he is a good man. It is an absolute honor. It is an absolute privilege. It is my joy to be with you all in community, to be putting our minds together. So be it in our minds, to be learning about restorative justice in Indigenous communities, doing this in a restorative way, doing this in a community peacemaking way, which is a Haudenosaunee form of restorative justice. So let's get into it, people. Grateful to have you here for this 7-week course. We have a few things to do today. So we're first and foremost, we're going to take a look at the class overall. So we're just going to be taking a look at the syllabus. Then we're going to take a look at a little bit more about myself, and then just an overview of the course as a whole. So let's get into it, people. I'm going to share this screen right here. Thank you all for being here today. Yes, you, the other person on the side of that screen. Grateful for you. Welcome to the course. A couple required textbooks we have for the course, and these are right here, which are Navajo Nation Peacemaking, Living Traditional Justice, and also Justice is Healing, Indigenous Ways, Writings on Community Peacemaking and Restorative Justice from the Native Law Center. If you have any questions about that, be sure to reach out to me. So those will be our required texts. Be sure to have those, as we will be reading those throughout the semester as well too. You can take a look at the overview of where we're going in terms of what the course structure is like, this 7-week layout. And this week is an overview. Next week, we'll be talking more about the Indigenous legal systems and models of restorative justice. Topic 3 is peacemaking. Week 4, we'll talk about truth and reconciliation in the state child welfare system. Week 5, we're talking about environmentalism, healing relationships with all our relatives. Week 6 is talking about restorative justice in Indigenous communities. It's another overall week. And week 7 is our final presentations. So how this course is set up, just as I scroll up to the top here to show you how the course is broken down, is you have a number of different assignments here, and those would be your participation, which is 35% of your grade. So this is from your weekly check-ins on. We will have a group me, which you can find on our course canvas, which you'll be sure to check in with 3 to 7 sentences each week on that. For our community peacemaking, we'll be doing as a course. So we'll be using this experiential knowledge to be able to learn about what it's like to be in community, even through a digital circle. Also, you'll be on Canvas. You'll be having weekly modules you'll be responding to as well too, with anywhere from 2 to 5 minute videos or from 4 to 7 sentences responses as well too. So that's part of your participation grade, which is key. So be sure to be up to date on that if you want to get your full credit for the course. You all have your final presentation, which is 35% of your final grade as well too. This is a 7 to 10 minute recorded presentation on Friday of week 7. In this presentation, it's really on any topics which are of interest to you as they relate to restorative justice in Indigenous communities. It could be something that we've talked about already. It could be a new topic or something else that we have not talked about, but you want to bring into the course as well too. I just ask that you bring in that critical mind for when we're looking at outside resources as well too, whenever possible using primary sources, having people tell about the stories themselves as well too, and when possible using triangulation of data to try to see different sources if they're saying similar things, and if they're not, recognizing that as well too in your findings. For your 1-page infographic of what you learned in the class, so it's a little bit more of an artistic mindset if you want to lean into that, and if you want to go into your legal mind as a wordsmith, you're welcome to take that side of the spectrum as well too. Both are welcome on this assignment. If you wanted to, you can make a collage of images online or from an actual drawing of anything that you want to remember from this class. Let's say a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. What is it that you really want to remember from this class experience? I want you to create a document that would be able to encompass that learning. So maybe this is more artistic or poetic. I've had people do what's called an infographic using canva.com, canva.com, using these templates for infographics, which are these minimalist images and just a few words to be able to make these ideas. So what are some key notions, takeaways for perhaps your own practice as a restorative justice practitioner, perhaps as your own practice as a lawyer, as a peacemaker, perhaps your own practice as a human being, making a difference in this world as well too, and just in your studies and findings, and all of us as lifelong learners, as I'm learning alongside you as well too, and grateful to be in that place. We will talk about later how Cree researcher Sean Wilson talks about how research is ceremony. Anytime we're putting our minds together like this, that can be ceremony in itself as well too. So those are your major assignments, and we'll talk about them more as we go throughout the semester as well too. This is an overview of the course as we just talked about. I would love to tell you a little bit more about myself here. I have a medicine wheel here, which can stand for many different things. It stands for our physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions of ourselves. It also stands for all the different peoples of here on Mother Earth, all the different people. We come from different places. We are all human beings. We are all connected. We are all related. This stands for our sacred medicines of tobacco, sweetgrass, sage, and cedar. This can stand for the four directions as well too, things that seem like they're totally unrelated. For instance, for those of you who are taking this course in Vermont, if you were to go east, you'd hit some water, and eventually you kept going east, eventually kept going east, kept going east. Eventually you'd come back to where you began with as well too. So things that seem like they're totally separate, east and west, can actually be very much interrelated, just like our relationship here as human beings on the other side of the screen, whoever's listening to my voice here. So this was some of the readings that I shared with you earlier. This is an abbreviated thing of what I was saying, and I just kind of want to share with you just the diversity and beauty of different tribes, different languages. There's over 574 federally recognized tribes. There's another few hundred state recognized tribes. There's another hundreds of tribes that are still seeking recognition to this day, and they still exist with a history, a culture, a tribe, even if they're not recognized by the state or federal government. So here in the Oneida language specifically, which is one of the 6 tribes that make up the Haudenosaunee, which also means the people of the Longhouse, sometimes referred to in French as the Iroquois, and sometimes in English as well as the 6 nations, which are the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and the Tuscarora. My family is Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. There's a picture of myself before a powwow in our regalia, our traditional clothing here to in the right side of the picture would be my grandmother, and the left side would be my cousin Norma, some wonderful human beings as well. So you can just see for the Oneida language, for example, K's are like G's, our T's are like D's, G's are like D's, K's like G's, just some different, just for example, some different things for the language as well too. But it's very important as language is part of culture as well. Up until 1990, the Native American Languages Act, it was illegal for Native people to be speaking their own languages. So this is why I'll be very intentional about using this. And we'll talk more about the Indian boarding schools and Indian residential schools. And this motto was to kill the Indian to save the man. The notion to be able to take away Native people's languages was a key part of that. So this is why my great grandfather had gone through that. My great uncle unfortunately was killed and did not get to come home from that. As if you've heard of this movement of every child matters, he would be one of those children who never got to come home. So that being said, I am very grateful to be here, continuing on the story of my ancestors, my relatives, to be sharing the beauty and the truth and the knowledge of our ways and the wisdom and the beauty of it. So let me continue on here. So my identity here, I am also English American. I'm an enrolled member of the tribal nation of the Oneida of Wisconsin. I'm also Irish American and German American. I am a US passport holder. I'm also a Haudenosaunee passport holder. I am married to my wonderful wife. Her name is Julia, and she is Mexican American, a Latina, and Syrian American, and really just an incredible human being who's incredibly kind and sweet. We have 2 dogs, Sydney and Millie, here in the bottom right. Sydney like Momo from Avatar: The Last Airbender, the cartoon. Millie like Zero from Nightmare Before Christmas. And Liguadio, this is my name. When I was first 9 years old, they called me Laksari, which means he is a good man. But then they said, no, let's call him he is a good man. They initially called me he is a good boy. But they said, let's call him he is a good man so that he will grow into that someday. So I think about that every day of living up to that title. So my education, I'll briefly go over here. I went to Foothill High School in Santa Ana in Orange County, California. And I went to Pepperdine University for my undergraduate, where I studied communication with an emphasis in rhetoric and leadership. I did a Native American political leadership program at George Washington University in 2014. I earned my master in public administration and a certificate in American Indian Studies from California State University of Long Beach. I have my PhD in leadership and organizational consulting, which I earned in April of 2021 from the University of San Diego. And I was also an invited guest to audit Nation Building 1 and 2 at Harvard Kennedy School. And I'm a lifelong learner as well too, and continually learning and looking forward to learning alongside you all. In terms of some of my professional and career experience, I was a neighborhood city councilman as director of Area E in Delray, California from 2013 to 2015 and served on the Land Use and Planning Committee. In 2014, I interned at the National Congress of American Indians. I tried out for the professional Native American lacrosse team of the Haudenosaunee Nationals indoor team in 2015 using a traditional wooden hickory lacrosse stick. And in 2018, I ran for mayor of Rancho Cucamonga. And although I did not win then, I continue to be involved in public service and trying to be the change I want to be in the world, that we are the leaders we've been waiting for, in the words of Grace Lee Boggs. So I am also an assistant professor in American Indian Studies at Cal State Long Beach, an adjunct professor in Vermont Law and Graduate School. I'm a trainer at the National Center on Restorative Justice at University of San Diego. I'm also a practitioner of restorative justice and community peacemaking while I travel across Turtle Island in North America, specifically usually working with tribal communities and using this traditional practice of community peacemaking. A program manager for the Haudenosaunee National Development Teams for lacrosse. I was a member of the Haudenosaunee World Committee and team liaison for the Haudenosaunee in 2023 for the World Lacrosse Men's Championship. I'm just very passionate about the creators game, the medicine game, and I'm also an announcer and broadcaster for the game as well too. I love being around the good medicine of lacrosse. I would love to help free Leonard Peltier, who has been a political prisoner since 1977, who we will talk about later on in this class of what that would mean in terms of restorative justice towards the Indigenous, towards our Native peoples and community, and toward Leonard Peltier himself, who we know did not commit a crime, yet is still in prison to this day since 1977, one of the longest political prisoners in the United States history. I would love to become a mayor, congressperson, senator, president of the United States, Haudenosaunee ambassador to the United Nations, and enact legislative change for the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. I would love to help heal our world and universe, as I'm told that all of us working together, that is like the ocean, that we are like water droplets all working together as one wave for change, for healing, for good, and for love. I also like to have fun, believe it or not, and I'm very passionate about video games. I've done research concerning Native representation in video games, and I'm very intrigued by the medium of how it is used in storytelling and the interactive nature of it. I also am passionate about graphic novels. A graphic novel I'd highly recommend is Moonshot Volume 3. If you're interested in Indigenous futurism, it's an anthology, a collection of these different stories from different tribal nations of imagining Native peoples in the future, as there's this notion of 7 generations for many different Native tribes, that everything that we've done is because of 7 generations behind us to allow us to be in this room, to have this conversation we're having right now. And that everything we do, don't just do it for yourself, don't just do it for your family, don't just do it for this generation, do it for 7 generations to come. So some of this notion of Indigenous futurism is imagining ourselves as Native peoples with our traditional ways and moving forward as well too, wherever that may be. I love different board sports, whether that's skateboard, snowboard, surf, wakeboard. Love doing it. Love being a part of that. Love having that connection to water and to nature, and just to a board, that sidewalk surfing. I love playing lacrosse, specifically with traditional hickory lacrosse stick, which my great grandfather used to make wooden lacrosse sticks, and I still love to use and play with it's known as a spiritual conduit, like an antenna to the spirit world. I'm very passionate about language and culture and learning not only about my own, but about other people's as well too. And this mutual reciprocity of sharing, not viewing myself any better or any worse than anyone else, but just engaging in this mutual reciprocity of respect and sharing and compassion. I love movies, TV, music, love playing the drums, the traditional native hand drum, and also modern drum set. I love to meditate and do yoga. I know for we specifically as Oneida people, we have this notion of having a good heart, which means having a love for yourself, love for your family, love for your community, love for your world, a good mind, which is having a generous sense of peace and a generous sense of humor, and then also having a strong spiritual flame, that your flame has the ability to ignite other people's spiritual flames as well too. So I know there has been different collaborations and supports and solidarity and unity between different groups and our Buddhist leaders as with our Haudenosaunee leaders. So a lot of this overlap as it comes to mindfulness, as it comes to gratitude, as it comes to being present, very much am attuned to that and appreciative of that, of the different practices where they come from in India and different parts of different cultures and different places. So grateful for each and every one of you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here today. And I just, as a reminder for our round of agreements for our community peacemaking circle, as we're going into our group meeting, going into this digital space together, as we put our minds together, I would say that we are all human beings who are worthy of love, no matter where we're coming from. Asking for respect and sharing. You don't have to agree with everything I say or what everyone else says, but I do believe that truth has no fear from investigation. So not being afraid to ask questions, encouraging you to treat others how you want to be treated, having that good heart, good mind, and a strong fire. Recognizing that whoever is speaking, everyone else is sending the speaker good, positive, and loving thoughts. And listening is valued as much as speaking. And what would you like to add for our community? So I'm going to ask you to add that as well too into our group me as we first come together as a community, set those agreements together. And now it's your turn as well too. So in addition to this first weekly module you're responding to, you're also going to make an introductory video of 2 to 5 minutes or 4 to 7 sentences, introducing ourselves to you. What is your area of study, perhaps your year in the program, any desired career path or what your career path is already, what you hope to get out of this class experience, as this class experience will be what we make it together, and something we should know about you, as we are all storytellers, that what would we not know about you? Simply just when we were previously strangers before, and now we can recognize ourselves as a friends, as community, as learners together alongside one another. So looking forward to learning from you all in that regard. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate each and every one of you. All right, people, overview of restorative justice in Indigenous communities. Let's get into it, people. Happy week 1. All right, so first and foremost, we want to describe the theoretical underpinnings of traditional tribal justice using the framework of the Navajo, also known as the Dene, means the people, the Navajo Nation's peacemaking process and example. We'll talk more about this. Chief Robert Yasi turned the Dene or the Navajo court process from what would be before a vertical system where we have a judge on top and then have the people underneath in the stratified process. And instead of doing so, having a vertical process, Chief Robert Yazzie shifted their system to a horizontal process where now everyone goes in a circle, those who did the harm, those who were harmed, and Chief Justice Robert Yazzie as well too, as a part of that circle, as a part of the community. So it literally shifted the dynamic of the courtroom to be a fundamental part of how justice is carried out. And you'll read that as well too in our book, and you'll see that in some of the videos we'll watch in this semester. Legal pluralism is this notion of whose sovereignty. As legal pluralism, it will go into the different overlaps of jurisdiction, whether that be town, city, county, state, federally, and also our tribal nation sovereignty. So we'll be talking about different tribal nations as well too, and whose sovereignty that is. So we'll be talking more about legal pluralism. We're going to summarize generally the legal status of Indigenous governments in the United States according to federal and state laws, identifying the corresponding government powers that derive from each category. And first and foremost, in the Constitution itself is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, which is the Indian Commerce Clause. And we'll talk more about it, but it outlines how the federal government has a relationship designed to interact with tribal nations the same way that they do with different states and international entities. And later on in the 1950s, we would have Public Law 280, which would shift this relationship, and which is really a detriment on tribal sovereignty to make it from this relationship between a nation to a nation, as it's outlined in the Constitution, to make it in certain states to be between the tribal nation and the state. So really to go from a nation to a nation to really more of a municipality, which is more of a city or a town or a county comparatively, as opposed to being this nation to nation, as outlined in the Constitution for this notion of sovereignty. As many tribes would say, tribes have been sovereigns since time immemorial, since time began. If this is, for many tribes, they believe this Turtle Island is a place where we come from as people. And then sovereignty is this exercise of those rights as well too. We want to recognize the structural features of Indigenous restorative justice systems, and we'll talk about that, some of those spiritual interconnected natures, some of the key concept of circles and the key concept of community. We touched on the Navajo peacemaking process, and you'll read and watch more videos about it. Identify examples of Indigenous restorative justice systems and describe how they deliver justice to Indigenous communities, which we'll even touch on at the end of this slide, at the end of this PowerPoint as well too. Explain how the Navajo legal system incorporates traditional Navajo customary law using the example of the peacemaker court. There's a notion you'll read about for the Navajo or Dene. There's this notion in one of the book chapters saying this person acts as if they have no relatives. They're saying this notion right here is one of the, it conveys this notion of a lack of respect that someone would have there for their community, to act as if they have no relatives. So on the other side of that, this notion to act as if we are relatives in our engagements and how we respond and treat one another and see one another. Describe the ways in which Indigenous customary law protects Indigenous culture. We'll talk more about that throughout the semester, different tribal nations and sovereignty and what that looks like for each tribal nations. Explain and analyze the potential of the Oceti-Sakowin-Oyate Truth and Reconciliation process in South Dakota, which we will visit some of those concepts and values later in the semester. Identify two models of restorative justice implemented by external authorities, being either presidential proclamation and act of Congress. Now, I can tell you here that there is a Supreme Court case that put to trial restorative justice for tribal nations. This is Ex parte v. Crow Dog in 1883. And while it was the Sioux, or the tribes that make up the Sioux, are the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, and 9 different tribes that come out of those tribes. There was a Crow Dog, this person in that community, and after in the case that was involved, that there was a restorative way of trying to address the problem that had happened. However, the federal government tried to step in and tried to have the death penalty for the person who was involved in this crime. It ended up being the Supreme Court found out that the Supreme Court does not have jurisdiction on tribal lands with a tribal person with another tribal person, the native person, another native person. And later in 1885 would be this law of the Major Crimes Act, which would allow the federal government to go on the tribal nations if there were major crimes, which would include murder, kidnapping, sexual assault, and a list of different crimes as well too. Determine positive attributes and shortcomings of an external restorative justice model. Compare the efficacy of internal and external restorative justice approaches using the Bears Ears and Hawaii examples in internal models from previous modules. Outline at least 3 restorative justice models that address specific harms to Indigenous peoples. This is something that you consider throughout the semester. Identify the mechanisms by which subject-specific restorative justice approaches resolve, address, or repair historic harms. Design a restorative justice model to address a specific social problem or harm. So that application model as well too, with best practices and finding cultural alignment with your own self, with your own practice, where you're carrying this out, with the people you're carrying this out, that rings true, that aligns with your own self as well too. Research an Indigenous restorative justice approach and identify similarities and differences with at least 3 RJ models from previous modules. Identify structural features of selected RJ model or approach. Explain how the approach works and whether it is enforced through a tribal court or some other tribal authority or not. And those are some of the concepts that we'll be talking about throughout this 7-week course. So there's a book chapter I had authored. It's titled A Critical Review of the Native American Tradition of Circle Practices. I encourage you to look at that as well too, in terms of the different practices and the diversity of different practices and what they look like. Again, the different required textbooks that you'll have for the semester, just saying again, Navajo Nation peacemaking and justice is healing. Some of the overall themes of restorative justice in Indigenous communities. Again, they're going to be very different. However, overall, you may notice a sacred, perhaps spiritual practice and tradition connected to the Creator, or perhaps the Great Spirit or Great Mystery, or whatever that may be for different tribal nations or for Indigenous peoples. Interconnected nature of one another in all living things. Things will be a common theme that you might notice perhaps across Turtle Island and across Mother Earth. Diversity of specific traditions for peoples across Mother Earth. So again, just that there'll be certain similarities and certain overlap, and there's also going to be a lot of a lot of unique nature to the different tribal nations, different practices of how restorative justice is carried out, or what that has looked like historically and what that looks like today and going forward. So for instance, my Oneida relatives and also the Haudenosaunee, we use an eagle feather fan, and it's said by Chief Orrin Lyons of the Haudenosaunee that this talking piece, it was noted that it was good form as a speaker, that you'd be holding this eagle feather fan so people would know who was speaking. It's also a liaison between us and the spirit world, as the eagle is this bird that flies above the rain clouds. It's a leader of all the other birds. These feathers are so sacred, it's never supposed to touch the ground. We'd put it in an eagle feather box, but a speaker would stand and hold this, and it would identify and signify to everyone else who the speaker was, that they would send this person good and positive thoughts. And when they were done speaking, they would sit down and pass the talking piece onto the next person as well too. And it's believed when you're holding that eagle feather, you get that properties and characteristics of that eagle as well too when you're holding that and having that eagle perspective. The Apache people have used traditionally a burden basket. It's in this picture, the top middle here. So to start off different things, would you be going through? Would be taking these, taking your burdens and putting them into this basket. So metaphorically, but kind of doing this process to have this release to put these burdens into this basket. As you're going it around here, passing it around. For Lakota people, use a sacred pipe. And one of my great uncles, who's Oneida, has had a chance to be a part of one of these processes before. And I talked about this notion of diminishing circles, how it started at nighttime, went all the way through the next morning. So there was like food and there was childcare and people were in this circle, and that the person who was starting the ceremony would pack the pipe in a certain way and be talking about what was going to happen. And as they shared, the person would rotate the pipe in a clockwork fashion and pull from the pipe and be talking about what they were talking about. When they passed to the next person, they would they'd pass it to the left in a clockwise fashion, and that person would rotate the pipe in a clockwise fashion and pull from it and share. And the idea of a diminishing circle is you keep going around until every single person has nothing else to say, until every single person has passed. And that is the framework for when it would be done. And I apologize if I mispronounce here. For the indigenous people of the Pacific Northwest, the Kwaka Wag use a speaker's staff. And there's a picture of this in the side right. And I apologize if I mispronounce here. For our Akon chiefs in Western Africa, use a linguistic staff. Okiampoma as a royal spokesperson. In the Maori in New Zealand, have used a toko toko, a ceremonial talking stick. In Hawaii, indigenous peoples have used this practice of a ho'oponopono, and generally speaking, it is carried out by tribal elders and specific peoples who are doing this. And just generally, a summarized version of this would be going through a deep spiritual process, recognizing these steps of I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, and I love you. Other uses of this within restorative justice in indigenous communities would be in Rwanda, following the genocide there, and this use of Ubuntu. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu speaks about Ubuntu, saying, Ubuntu speaks about our interconnectedness. You can't be human all by yourself if you have this quality. You are known for your generosity. We think ourselves far too frequently as just individuals, separated from one another. You are connected, and what you do affects the world. There's also a documentary on this about the Hollow Water Community Holistic Circle Healing Approach that used circles to use it as a process for healing from sexual assault that had been rampant in the community, in a way of addressing that with accountability and healing. And also another example is the cake circle making process in Alaska, which is used for an alcohol recovery program. Here is our playlist for the semester as well too, which you'll be looking for. More resources are added to that. And while we will not be able to watch all the videos in the semester, I definitely encourage you can scroll down to the bottom, type in Command F to find different topics you're interested about, or just peruse through those and look through. And if any topics or things that you're interested in, please, and I have created that resource for you all. Here is a resource, this native-land.ca. It's somewhat similar to a Google Maps or something similar. However, you can find out whose land you are on, whose tribal lands traditionally you are on, who are still you are on. And you can, if you click on the site, you can look at websites for the tribes that are still here. You can look at restorative ways to support these people as an ally, or if you're an indigenous person yourself, this is connecting to your own tribal lands, whatever this may be. And also here you can see I have created a change.org for a co-stewardship of all state and national parks with indigenous tribal nations from local areas. So this presentation is also on canvas.com. So you can take a look at that link if you want to check it out and sign your name to learn more about what this would look like as a form of restorative justice of granting co-stewardship of all state and national parks with indigenous tribal nations from local areas. As this is all Turtle Island, this is all tribal nations before settlers had arrived here. And I really enjoyed this quote here from Lieutenant Governor of Zuni Pueblo, Carlton Boakati. Says, what can be a better avenue of restorative justice than giving tribes the opportunity to participate in the management of lands their ancestors were removed from? So in essence, land back. And there is this notion for the Haudenosaunee of a Thanksgiving address. It's our words before all else. and it's a way to come together in a good mind. It's a way of giving thanks. And I will give a very briefly abbreviated English version of such as it can be said in our traditional Haudenosaunee languages as well too. But we'd say first and foremost, we give thanks for the people, for Mother Earth, for the water, for the fish, for the plants, for the food plants, for the medicine plants, for the animals, for the trees, for the birds, for the four winds, for our grandfathers, the thunderers, for our grandmother, the moon, for our eldest brother, the sun, for the stars, for enlightened teachers, for the great creator. And if we left out anything, that was not our intention to do so. We leave it up to each individual to give thanks in their own way. So I leave it up to you to give thanks in your own way as we come together with a good mind. As we say after each and every one of those things, we would say in Oneida, let's put our minds together, so be it in our minds. Or in the Mohawk translation would say, and now our minds are one. And again, it's a reminder that going back to that full circle of what I said earlier about Sean Wilson, how research is ceremony, and so is life. Everything that we do shares in the ongoing creation of our universe. That's Sean Wilson of the Cree Nation. So I just want to say to you people, Yawonko, thank you in Oneida. If you have any questions, do reach out to me. I am here on your side to help you be successful in this class and outside of it, whatever comes next, that we are all human beings worthy of love. I just want to say to you, Yawonko, Ganunkwa Unugiwa means thank you, I love you. Until next time, Oneida. Take care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.